Hey, so next conversation, extremely excited to have somebody I've gotten to know like over the years, and a conversation around biometrics, which I think is an important conversation. It's kind of interesting, trying to having these conversations. Don't hear about it as much here as we do in some other places, but 100% we start to see that this is happening all over the place. So with that, let's jump into it. But before we do, please introduce yourself. For you now, give a little bit about your background, about why we would have you, the brand, to come in here to talk to us about it.
Awesome. Chris Wilson. I'm with Mead and Hunt, and we are a A&E firm. I head up the physical security department for them. Background is 24, 25 years in the industry. Spent the first 15 as an integrator, working on enterprise level clients, and then I've worked for the last 10 or so as a consultant. So it's been interesting to work with a lot of these enterprise clients. Biometrics is coming up as a big topic for a lot of us. And so excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate you making the time to do that. So talking about biometrics as a whole, like what's your view on that and state of where we're at currently right now? I had to get into a little bit about adoption and different marketplace there, but where are we at?
Yeah, I think my view on it is that biometrics are not inherently bad, and I think they're getting a bad rap. I think a lot of people are saying that inherently biometrics are just bad, full stop, and I think that's a bad rap for where they really are. I think that we're not doing a good job of dealing with it and implementing them the right way, and I think there's a big gap there that we can do a lot better. But I think that inherently they're a really convenient way to do things. They're a very secure way to do things when they're implemented correctly, and I think that's the big piece, is that there's too many disconnects between the different pieces and parties involved in that process. And that's where we end up in this spot where now there's legal issues and challenges and ramifications and fines getting issued and people protesting them. And it's because we're just not doing it the right way.
So talk to me about what are some of the things that you could be doing the right way? What are those?
Well, I think the first one is, and when you walk around, there's a lot of people that are thinking about it from a hardware or a software perspective. Not what are we going to do with the data? And actually the conversations that I'm having with the clients, the very first question is, what data are we going to collect? How are we going to store it? Who's going to access it? How are we going to analyze it, refine it? Oh, and now let's talk about what software are we going to use for that? And then finally, what hardware are we going to use? And far too often it's, that's a pretty cool reader, or, we started that hardware level. And I think we're in a space now where we need to think about it from a data perspective and not a hardware first perspective, and I'd be able to get there.
Now, what's interesting is somebody said in one of these talks I did yesterday that we're a data industry that is applying it to security. And I found that to be like the perspective that changed when you think of it that way. And that data being like a source of data that is then applied, then it goes like at many different. So how do you get to the data? How do you handle the data? The rest of it. So how do you believe this ends up? Like we're having these conversations currently now. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think that the number one issue we're running into is this is handled at a state level right now, and we're running into every state's got their own regulation. I think we're going to ultimately need some sort of an overarching guidance. I don't know that it's a law, but it's some sort of regulation that's happening at the top level that everybody can then be able to apply with that. I think that it's going to be easier to then manage that as we go state to state and we deploy across that. We're going to have some sort of guidance to be able to mandate against. And ultimately, companies need to think about the data first. That's really what we're dealing with here, right? Even if you look at a video system and analytics, it's all about the data. And biometrics is no different from that. And the data security and data privacy is such a big part of that because we're dealing with PII in many parts for that. And they've got to think about that part of it. If you're in this industry, in this space, the data is and what's valuable for us now. Well, that's what we need to be protecting as well as everything else.
That's also interesting because we've always taken a look at the industry as protecting people physically. And a lot of what you're talking about in this end is protecting people virtually, from a logical standpoint versus a physical standpoint on that side. And maybe, I guess, it's through the evolution how the industry goes to get there. When does it have, it's like, one day we're going to walk through the doors and it's going to be an identity show, or what?
Well, in some ways it already is. I mean, there's a lot of identity companies already here, and it's changing what that is, right? We already went through one paradigm shift where our job was to lock the doors and keep the bad people out. We were protecting the building, and now a lot of what we're talking about is changing the user experience. It's how people feel and interact and live in a building, so to speak. And I think it's the same thing with identity. We're managing it from a physical level, a logical level, and then the privacy and security that goes with that. And we're collecting, I talked to somebody they're collecting 15,000 data points from a building every day. That's an immense amount of data that a lot of these systems can do stuff with, and personal information is part of that. And there's a lot of decisions that we can make using that personal information, but there's also a lot of decisions that we can make by anonymizing it. And I think that's another angle in how we can deal with it. And far too many just don't have the policies from a biometric standpoint. And if they do have the policies, there's some that aren't even following them. And so they got to implement those.
What's interesting there is that you wonder, I'd walk around the show, you would imagine there'd be data scientists within our industry, and I'd be curious to know how many of them are actually hired at different companies on that side. So, yeah.
I know of 2 companies I've talked to that have data scientists and staff, and as far as I know, neither one of them were at the show today.
Well, that tells you more than anything else. All right, so question for you. Can we have ethical biometrics?
I think short answer is yes. I think we've got some work to do to get there. I think, again, it's too many of the products, the software, the systems are not built for anonymizing it when it can be anonymized. They're built around keeping that data intact. And I think that's where a lot of the privacy is coming into it. And that's where it's creating the problems. And I think that we can get there, but people got to think differently.
Well, I'll give you my impression on it too. It's shocked to be little. I think the end users are going to start driving a bit of it. Like, I'm noticing enough conversations coming in my way where they're saying we need the data and we need to understand, maybe not exactly who the person is, but we have to understand the attributes of the person so that we can create not only a good experience, bring the level of security and safety that is needed, but then also create the workflows of what we want to have happen, especially in the enterprise side where you got people coming back. But also, are you looking at financial and all the other market, life sciences we talked about a little bit earlier? But yeah, I think it's the end users. I think are going to start to drive it more than anybody else.
I totally agree, and I think that we're also seeing where clients want to start putting their data from their systems in data lakes, in data warehouses, and blending that with publicly available anonymized data. Bluetooth data off of mobile devices is a big one in the transportation, the aviation industries. And what can we learn about that? And we don't need to know that it's Lee's phone or Chris's phone. We need to know of how many people are here and how can we change the experience? How can we change the air quality, the security of the building? Shooting any of those things. It doesn't matter who we are. It matters that we got that many people there through the need.
So do you see Noble as a positive for biometrics or not tied to the adoption? Because frankly, if you think about it, it leapfrogged with the conversation about, there was no conversation about mobile in a lot of ways, especially NFC wallets specifically on that end. And then all of a sudden it sort of leapfrogged into where now that's where a lot of people are moving to. Do you think that will be a net positive for the adoption of biometrics some more, or has nothing to do with it, or negative?
Well, I don't know that I'm necessarily sure it's negative or positive yet. I think the number one thing that I can tell you is that people are 100% more willing to give their biometric data to that mobile device than they are to a reader mounted on the wall. And I think that speaks volumes to what that's going to change. And so, and maybe you can pull it that's positive or negative. I'm not sure I've got a full stance there yet, but I can tell you they're pulling. When we did a project in transportation, right? It used to be that if we needed transportation data, we would go to the county, the state, the highway department, whatever. Who knows more about transportation data today? And Apple and Uber and those people using mapping, know more about the transportation and traffic flow than the highway system. Well, and we're already, the users, they are already giving their user data and their personal information to that mobile device or to those services. Without a doubt, and again, they're far more willing to give it to that than a reader mounted on the wall.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say too, a lot of the conversation we're having here is very North American focused too. Because as you move outside of the country, it's completely wildly different. Inside, Asia, the Middle East, and then also in the European marketplaces. So it's wildly different on those fronts too. So even more complicated in some sense.
It is. Yeah, there's Europe, you got GDPR. I know India is one of the markets that's got a huge biometric presence. Like, it's massive over there. And you get into like South America where you get some just banking or maybe some government stuff. And so it's certainly wild. They're wildly different across those different countries and regions for sure.
Absolutely. All right, Chris, we're up from time, but thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I really do appreciate it. And I also thank the team of DK Techco. They planted the tree in your honor. So Awesome. Thank you.